Welcome to the Brouhaha with Dale McKee and Marshall Wood. Two sports talking sports with those in the know on the Brouhaha Show.
Good evening, one and all, and welcome to tonight's Brouhaha. Lots of things going on in the football world with bowls and recruiting and all kinds of stuff. And then there's Christmas. Dale, what's going on in your world these days? Are you ready for Christmas and a sack full of bowl games?
Well, I'm ready for Christmas for sure. I don't know about the sack full of bowl games because some of those bowl games so far that I've watched have been runaways. Been one or two close ones, but most of them's kind of been runaways this year.
You know, there's a lot of bowl games. When I say the sack full, I mean there are. I mean, do you know? I know I'm hitting you, man. I'm hitting you right off. I mean, I don't expect you to know, and that's not a slam, but I'm hitting you with a question that I certainly don't know the answer to. What is there, about 40?
44.
I knew it. I knew you'd have it. That's what I'm talking about.
They added the Jimmy Kimball Bowl this year in Los Angeles.
Are you kidding me?
I know, really. I mean, look it up. It's Jimmy Kimball. They created another bowl so all 88 teams that had a winning record could go to a bowl or had to achieve the 6 wins, and Jimmy Kimmel didn't even have to pay for it. That's what I was told.
I bet he gets a big fat check.
Well, he's supposed to do something about, be part of it. But for some reason, his name came up because he had mentioned it on the show a few years ago, and somebody took advantage of his situation, And so, anyway, you'll have to look it up about how they gave Jimmy Kimmel the name for his bowl game this year.
Maybe we can get a Brouhaha bowl. That would be a good bowl.
I think it would be good. I really do. I don't know what we would call it. Dumb and Dumber? I don't know. No. We could get the two teams with the worst GPA to play, I don't know.
Oh, boy. Well, listen, one of all the kinds of stuff I'm all excited here, I mentioned earlier, is recruiting. Fans across the nation are all optimistic about the new players coming to their schools and making their program the best ever. Interesting topic, Dale, especially in the light that recruiting these days is not the recruiting that we grew up with. You agree with that?
Oh, yes, I agree. I mean, you remember back in the 60s, Johnny Vaught had his run of Mississippi. He'd signed 45, 50 kids, and they didn't have a number like they do now. They hold them at 85, so most of them have about 23 slots for scholarships, somewhere in that neighborhood, 22 to 25 it looks like. I think Southern had a few more this year because they've had a lot of people transfer out or quit the program or ever what it was, but they've left the program.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're talking about recruiting, and we have a guest. So I'm sure that you have arranged something that's right in line with that for us tonight. So tell us about our guest and what they're going to speak about.
Well, his name is Christian Bird. He's from the Jackson area, lives in the Jackson area. He came to me I wanted to interview him because he can tell us about all 3 of our Division I programs in Mississippi. Southern, State, and Ole Miss. I could have got somebody from, say, State or Ole Miss or Southern just to tell me about theirs, but I thought, for our show that we would come up with somebody that could talk to us about all 3 of them. And so he's just going to tell us a little bit about how his opinion on how recruiting went for all 3. Did they fill the needs that they needed to fill, and maybe some special players that they signed.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to digging into the current recruiting reports and digging into the process a bit if we have time for that. But first, let's hear from some of our sponsors, and we'll be back with Christian Bird right after these words.
Do you have any roof damage or missing shingles? Do you need a roof inspection to ensure your roof is functioning properly? Look no further than the roofing specialist Jackson Brothers Construction Services. We are here to service you with affordable prices, amazing customer service, and quality work you'll be proud of. Call us today at 251-295-6442.
The Jackson Brothers Construction Services. They'll do you right. You heard it here first.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel has last-minute ideas for Christmas. Case knives, Cypress porch swings, Bayou Classic cast iron cookware, Big Green eggs and accessories, Bayou Classic outdoor cookers, Carhartt apparel, Nebo LED flashlights, Makita power tools, Yeti drinkware, and so much more. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954.
Welcome to the show, Christian Bird. Christian's going to talk to us about recruiting tonight, Marshall, and I'm sure you'll have some interesting questions.
Oh, well, don't give me more credit than I deserve.
That's true. I won't. Anyway, welcome to the show, Christian, again. And Christian, how do you think the Big Three did in Mississippi in recruiting?
I think they all three did well, and I think they left some time, obviously, for improvement. I mean, look, there's really three phases now in the recruiting world. There's the early signing period. There are opportunities with the transfer portal that have opened up a whole new array of how you recruit, how you do recruiting, what you do. And there's kind of the end of the season group of the portal guys who come through. There's the post-bowl game group of portal guys who come through. And then there's guys who filter in after spring practice and didn't get the spot they want or if something happens. So there's that element, and then there's also, another signing period in February. So while most guys would love to have everything wrapped up, opportunities present themselves, and everybody usually holds some spots over for the portal and for some late signees. And so this was kind of a glimpse into what those three schools would do, but there's still a lot of room for them to move around and to get better. So the short answer is I think they all three improved their rosters and improved their teams.
Well, let's start with USM. They seem to recruit Mississippi really hard, and they even recruited the private schools, a little bit harder than most Division I teams have in the last few years. What can you tell us about USM? Maybe some of the key players that they might have signed.
The USM did great, and here's the deal with USM. You're right. They definitely have recruited the private schools harder than they have in the past. I'll say this much, though, about USM. Apart from those private school players that they signed some from Greenville Christian, they signed some from MRA. Here's what really stood out to me the most. A guy named Bryce Walton, a punter, a junior college punter. And you say to yourself, Christian, what in the world are you talking about? Here's what I'm talking about. This guy is at Copiah Lincoln. He was at Pisgah High School earlier. He had Division I SEC offers, and he turned those down to go to Southern. He can flip a field. It's unbelievable. He is a weapon, and in a day where it feels like offenses go up and down the field and it's bend, don't break, if you've got a guy that can completely change the trajectory of the way a game's going by flipping the field, he's that guy. He's got a huge leg. I think he's got an NFL leg. His name's Bryce Walton. The guy that I want Southern. They'll know immediately. The first time Southern punts next year, you will remember that I said that because he's that deadly of a kicker.
Wow.
The second guy is, again, Southern comes in and signs the number one quarterback in the state of Mississippi, a kid named Zach Wilkie, who I think is really good out of Hernando High School, and I think potentially for the future, that's where they're looking at quarterback. They got better at the skill position and they hit the portal, picking up Dylan Gill, a linebacker that played at Ole Miss, and then a four-star player from Mississippi State. He's probably going to play running back for him. So you've got all these weapons from all these different facets of how to recruit, whether it's special teams, offense, or defense. Southern's roster is drastically improved, and that's the real key to it.
All right, let's take a stop in Starkville and tell us a little bit about who Mississippi State. I I know they signed, well, you can tell us the exact number, but I want to say it's around 18, and at least over half of those were, or at least, maybe 60% or so were from the state of Mississippi also. But they seemed to sign 5 dandy dozen. So did they have the best year of the three?
I think they had as good of a year as anybody. And here's the key. Yes, certainly inside the state they did. The key with Mississippi State is exactly what you said. They got the top ranked players in the state. They got the players they wanted. George from George County, who was a flip from Ole Miss, he committed there, and then a number of other players that were standout 4-star caliber guys. This is a classic Mississippi State class, and what I mean by that is Mississippi State has always done a good job finding the best defensive players in the state, doing a really good job of getting guys that maybe are 3-star players, but they always, for as long as I can remember, to take a 3-star caliber player, even a 4-star caliber player, and turn them into a first-round draft pick. They've made a living doing that. And so, to me, this class is no different, really, than any other class they've had. Yeah, maybe it's ranked a little higher, but it's filled with the types of players that make Mississippi State who they are, and that's kind of a tough, hard-nosed football team defensively, and it's another class that does that. I thought they did a really good job also adding offensive weapons. I know they wanted to get better or deeper at wide receiver, and I know if they want to kind of have another player post Will Rogers ready to go in that system at quarterback. So overall, if you look at it, they're certainly not done, but I think that they did a great job coming in and improving the roster, not just defensively but also offensively. Percy Lewis, who's the number one junior college offensive lineman in the country, he committed from Oregon, committed to them. So a lot of really good things coming Mississippi State's way, and certainly one of their better class in the last 2 or 3 years.
All right, what about our last stop up in North in Oxford? How did Lane Kiffin do in his second year as recruiting for the Rebels?
Yeah, I think Ole Miss did good. They certainly missed on some guys that they wanted in the state of Mississippi, but overall I felt what they did well was address needs. They went to Virginia and got a coveted player, the last name Banks, that was going to be a linebacker hybrid athlete. He picked Ole Miss over Michigan. They went into Florida and got a big-time defensive back. They went in and got multiple linebackers out of Georgia, specifically one committed to Georgia Tech, and he ended up picking Ole Miss over Florida and a host of others. So they did a really good job. They had certainly got some players in the state of Mississippi they wanted, but I just felt like as a whole, Ole Miss came in knowing that they're going to hit the portal probably harder than any of the other schools. I think you could see up to half of Ole Miss's class being portal guys, and so it wasn't a huge effort. Bryson Hurst, another offensive lineman from the coast that they really wanted. He'll probably play guard at the next position or the next stop. He was a tackle in high school, but overall, I think Ole Miss fans have a lot left on the plate to look forward to. They finished 21, 22, somewhere there, but they're going to sign at least, in my opinion, 10 to 12 portal guys, and that'll kind of round off the way that ends for the rest of the year. So I think it'll be a heavy dose there and a little different approach by Lane Kiffin, but an approach where he wants to flip the roster from a personnel standpoint and get older and more experienced. So I think you'll see a lot of that.
Well, let me ask you something before we stop on the subject of the top three, the Division III teams here. I think everybody knows Will Rogers will be the quarterback in Starkville next year for sure. A lot of people are saying it's Ty Keys' team at USM. What is Ole Miss going to do, the transfer portal with quarterback? That seems to be the biggest question mark with the Rebels next year is who will play quarterback? Will it be the Altmaier boy from Starkville? Is he ready for it, or are they going to have to go out and try to find somebody in the transfer portal? Because I've heard Bo Nix to Ole Miss, and then I heard Bo Nix to Oregon. And, Rattler from Oklahoma to Ole Miss, and he ends up at South Carolina. So what are the Rebels going to do about that one spot?
I think Ole Miss will take at least 2 transfer guys at the quarterback position because they don't have a lot in that quarterback room. But I don't know who those guys are going to be, and I don't think that anybody knows who those guys are going to be. I think a lot of people thought Bo Nix would be one of them. A lot of people thought Spencer Rattler would be one of them. A lot of people thought Dylan Gabriel would be one of them, but they're not. And so Luke Altmaier is going to be a part of that process no matter what. I think they have a lot of belief in him, but it's about wanting to get deeper in that room. So who knows? I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the show the 3 different ways of portal players that are available. Maybe there'll be more, but I do think they want a guy who's played. I don't think they're interested in the guy, even if he was highly recruited, who hasn't played but was a backup, even if he's a freshman, like a Jack Miller who's transferring from Ohio State, will more than likely end up at Florida. They want a guy who was on the roster, and so at the end, or on the field. So at the end of the day, I think Luke Altmaier's part of it. But I definitely think there's 1 or 2 more guys that are going to come in. Who those guys are is a complete toss-up right now, and it has a lot of fans feeling anxiety that follow Ole Miss in terms of recruiting.
This is Bryce. I want to ask you a question about this transfer portal, and I'm picking these numbers up, and I may be hitting you, with something that you're not prepared for, but how many? I read somewhere there's like 2,000 kids in the transfer portal currently, and probably 60 to 65 quarterbacks. Is that anywhere close to accurate?
Yeah, that's right. The problem is, most of the time when you're leaving for a reason. And so the truth of the matter is there isn't a home for a lot of these kids. The grass isn't greener on the other side, and they haven't picked up on that yet. They think they're just going to be able to pick up the phone and go where they wanted to because they had 20, 30 offers out of high school. But it doesn't work like that. And so take, for example, there are a number of players who I think are backups on multiple rosters for BCS rosters, big caliber kids who were in the portal. But Lane Kiffin is I think has made it pretty clear through back channels he wants a guy that has played on the field this year. Mm-hmm. So you've got to watch that in many ways. Some teams are willing to compromise, some aren't. It just depends on the fit. And so I think that the bottom line, your observation is correct. There's not enough home for the people that are in the portal.
Mm. I want to ask you this too, and you mentioned this when you started about the elements now of recruiting. It's a whole new world. You're in this mix and you follow it closely. Do you have a personal formula about how to allocate those? Your signing class. Do you have a formula how to mix that in, or is it just Katie bar at the door? What's the need of the moment?
Every single coach is different. I can't tell you that there's one. It depends on the roster. It depends on what's available. It depends on the connections that your coaches have and your players have. At the end of the day, there is no right way, but we're in uncharted territory. I think that we'll start to see some things play out over time, and we'll start to see, I don't want more than this many portal kids versus high school kids, and maybe I want a JUCO kid sprinkled in. But over time, what I think you're going to see is that even out. Right now, we just don't know. Okay. And so you're going to see some guys drafted from the portal standpoint based on their team. You'll see some that are drafted based on getting high school kids because maybe they're incredibly deep at certain levels, like Alabama. They don't need to go out and flip the roster really anywhere. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, no one knows, but I think that after 2 or 3 years, we'll start to see things settle down, and we'll get an idea of what most teams are going to do.
Thank you.
Hey, Christian, tell us about Jackson State's recruiting year.
Yeah, so, wild. I mean, the big news all day was that regardless of whether he's the number 1 or the number 2 player in the country, depending on where you were looking, kid out of Texas who's a cornerback. Deacon commits to Deion Sanders. Some people think it's great during the early signing period, and the rumor is there are even more 4- and 5-star kids that he could potentially get after this year. So it's just a wild ride when it comes to recruiting. I think they also picked up a 4-star Miami wide receiver as well. So Jackson State should be in the middle of every conversation.
He said before the recruiting opened up that he was going to shock the country with his class this year, and he also said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that I think I read where he said there is no NIL deal for this cornerback. But anyway, who knows? I guess you do.
Well, he may have said there's not one right now.
I got you.
I'm just telling you.
I got you.
There will be one.
Yeah.
Because it's still, and that part of it is a lot of that hadn't been worked out. So a lot of kids have been told we're going to give you X, Y, and Z. And, it's not on paper yet, but it will be. So right. Deion giving himself a little wiggle room. I think when the comment is not there for sure. What I will say is, just in terms of that class, I just think he's kind of changing the game, the NFL finds you no matter where you are. That's the reality of it. Every single year, if you watch the NFL draft, there'll be guys you've never heard of that get drafted high. So Deion is really accentuating that with the fact that, hey, listen, you can get drafted to Jackson State. I'm going to make sure you're on TV. Well, they were on TV 4 or 5 times this year. So I think Deion can change the way. I think he is a name that people know. He can pick up the phone. He can get an NFL exec on the phone. If he's got kind of the publicity around him this year to prove to people, you'll get noticed.
You know, you mentioned something about the NFL finding you. I came across an article somewhere this morning or yesterday about how many Hall of Famers come out of Mississippi schools. Jackson State, I believe, is either 4 or 6. I cannot remember. I think Ole Miss has had 3 and Mississippi State hadn't had one. So they'll find you, just like you said. If you're good enough, you're going to show up.
Well, listen, about the Jackson,
for sure.
About Deion, basically, you know, he signed a lot of these out-of-state kids. Does it seem like, in reality, when these Mississippi kids start maybe signing with him, how's that going to affect Ole Miss and State and Southern, you know?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have no idea what the future holds for how Deion recruits in Jackson State. What I know is if he's good enough to pull the number 1 or number 2 player from Florida State, he's good enough to pull a kid from Ole Miss State or Southern. So at the end of the day, you have to respect the fact that he's getting through and communicating and recruiting at a high level. It will be fascinating to see as more and more head-to-head battles happen who wins.
Listen, Christian, we certainly appreciate you. We're unfortunately, you know, we only have so much time, and I tell you what, the way you're going, we could go for a while. Why don't you? Listen, we can get you back sometime. But listen, before we run out of time, why don't you tell us, our listeners, how that they and we can keep up with you?
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter at Christian_Bird. Look, man, I do a number of podcasts, write for a couple different sites at different times, but the best place to get anything that I do is on Twitter. So at Christian_Bird, and any questions are welcome in terms of recruiting. If I don't have the answer, I'll try to get it for you.
There you go.
Well, listen, thank you again. We appreciate you joining the show, and we hope to have you back again.
Anytime, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a Merry Christmas.
All
Thank
right,
you.
You too.
Well, Dale, now we know more than we did when we started. We sure appreciate Christian being with us. We're going to take a break right now and be back for our final segment right after we hear from our sponsors.
Do you have any roof damage or missing shingles? Do you need a roof inspection to ensure your roof is functioning properly? Look no further than the roofing specialist Jackson Brothers Construction Services. We are here to service you with affordable prices, amazing customer service, and quality work you'll be proud of. Call us today at 251-295-6442.
The Jackson Brothers Construction Services. They'll do you right. You heard it here first.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel has last-minute ideas for Christmas. Case knives, Cypress porch swings, Bayou Classic cast iron cookware, Big Green eggs and accessories, Bayou Classic outdoor cookers, Carhartt apparel, Nebo LED flashlights, Makita power tools, Yeti drinkware, and so much more. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954.
Welcome back, everybody. You know, I enjoyed that, Dale. Anything that you got that stimulated the thought process and you want to say in addition to what Christian said?
Well, the SE, everybody comes out with ratings for your recruiting, and I saw somewhere where State was 11th in the SEC, and Ole Miss was 12th in the SEC, and of course that didn't count Texas and Oklahoma, thank goodness, or they would have been 13th, 14th, I assume. So, and USM surprised everybody. They were second in Conference USA, and so that's pretty good. So that was a high rating for them. So you just look at that, and of course Jackson State had to be the top notch in the SWAC, I would assume, just rating on the signing the boy out of Georgia, the defensive back, Travis Hunter. And like he said, they had a wide receiver 4-star coming from Miami, things like this. So I think it's a pretty good recruiting year. And like I said, the biggest concern in Oxford would be the quarterback situation. I think in Starkville it was beefing up the offensive line. You know, they lost Charlie Cross, the Laurel Laurel Tornado that opted out for the draft. And I think Southern just needed a lot of help in a lot of different areas. And I think that they helped themselves. And, of course, I didn't know about the punter, and that was very interesting.
That was interesting to hear.
You know,
I can't wait to
you-
see him punt.
Yeah, like,
Sounds
yeah,
like a
yeah.
great.
You know, and they've had some great punters, and, you know,
That might be why he went.
yeah.
Ray got.
Well, maybe he said, hey, you know, I'm going to get a lot of punts down here. You know? I don't know.
Well, maybe so. You know, this is a little cursory review I did, you know, before we got started today, and it may not be matched exactly what Christian said, but just I'll go ahead and defer to him. But just looking quickly, it said 24% in-state signees for Ole Miss as compared to 62% for Mississippi State, and that's typically, like Christian said, that's been a kind of a normal thing. Southern Mississippi, it said 83% of their guys were from in-state. I see a national rank here. I think it may have finished higher than this. Ole Miss 26, Mississippi State 25, and USM over the 100 mark. But anyway, they got it done, and now we're waiting to see what happens with the transfer portal. That's going to be a hoot for sure.
Yeah, and we did lose some good athletes out of state teams. You know, the big boy from Columbia, a big body there, went to Alabama. They had a really good athlete out of MRA, linebacker, that ended up going to South Carolina. And I'm sure there were some others that I can't remember right off that are, you know, that left the state that I wish we could have kept within the state borders. But with the transfer portal, they may be back one day. You never know.
You never know. You know, Miles Brennan entered the transfer portal, and I think I was getting excited. I said, man, what a great addition to USM that would be. But new coach called him up and said, you're going to play quarterback for us next year. And here he goes back to Baton Rouge.
Yes. I have a good friend in Lafayette. He's originally from Laurel. His grandson, Walker Howard, signed with LSU too, and Walker is going to enter in January.
He's a 5-star, isn't he?
He's a 5-star.
He may have something to say about him.
And I've also got a friend that coaches at Tennessee Martin. His son, Ty, started practice today at University of Alabama. He's a 5-star freshman quarterback also. Ty Simpson from Jackson, Tennessee.
Now, is he still at Alabama? Or is he in the transfer portal?
No, Ty he just came out of high school.
Oh, okay.
He just entered practice today, the first day of practice for the University of Alabama as a freshman, and he gets to go to the bowl game with him. How about that?
You know, so he's not an early enrollee shows up in January, basically. Now, I typically, but I did read that about this guy. Now that you mentioned, it's very interesting. Jalen Hurts did that, and before he was really enrolled in the January, and they used him on the scout team to mimic Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. I've read that same deal, you know, too. So, you know, that's interesting. And the Altmaier boy has roots in Laurel too. So Simpson and Altmaier, the quarterback at Ole Miss, back up, and Walker, they're all their dads were from Laurel. I just think that's very interesting.
That is an interesting note that only Dale McKee would know.
I don't know about that. I'm sure a lot of people know that.
Well, now they do. Oh, listen, the new recruiting environment, I got to tell you, I've read several articles, and there's some what a mess is basically what I'm trying to say. I don't know how they're going to do it now. Look at this thing, you know, and I heard Jimbo Fisher, I read something he said last week. He said there's always been an NIL stuff going on. It just wasn't legal, and nobody told anybody. I mean, he said that. I mean, you know, oh, yeah, we all been doing it. We just didn't say it. But now we can say it out loud. NIL. We didn't get into that, but how you like the NIL deal?
Well, you know, that's been going over for a long time. You know, I do a lot of reading of past history stuff in the newspapers and stuff. I remember reading an article in 1939. 1939. You
We're
know,
talking about 1939.
Yeah, Hitler was invading Poland at the time. But anyway, in the sports section, I remember reading this. There was a quarterback from Laurel, because I was reading a Laurel paper. So quarterback from Laurel they said there's going to be a bidding war between the New York Yankees and LSU football. A bidding war. So it's been going. So it's been going on a long time.
That's interesting because the Yankees can do that.
Yes, the Yankees
But
can.
no, LSU wouldn't do anything.
No, I don't think that's so.
I
didn't even know they had football in 1939.
Here's another thing we talking about. NIL deals. I want to go back to 2010. And talk about Cam Newton. He played 1 year at Auburn, won a national championship, won the Heisman Trophy, almost went to state. Somebody, I believe, by the name of John Bond, an alumni, had offered him allegedly $250,000.
Right.
Okay, he wound up going to Auburn. There was an extensive NCAA investigation into that, and it's very interesting to me to find out, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when they ultimately ruled on that and before the national championship game when Auburn was going to play Oregon, they said, well, we've investigated it, and they didn't give the money. There was money exchanged for him to come to Auburn, but it wasn't given to Cam. It was given to his daddy. So, in effect, that made it okay. The only penalty that was issued in that respect was that his daddy couldn't go to the national championship game. Pay me $250,000 and I'll watch it on TV. How about you, Dale?
Well, but that's odd that you say that, because you know how Reggie Bush got in trouble, right? Reggie Bush's parents accepted money from USC. His parents. So
it was but when was that? Was that in 06, 05, 04?
05 is when he finished, but I don't know when they finally caught up with him. But what I'm saying, he had to give up his Heisman Trophy and all this.
It's the same thing with Cam, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it is. And I think Mississippi State's the one got in trouble for it.
Well, the rich get richer, the poor get poor.
We're going to throw it to Auburn. We're going to put Mississippi State on probation.
Man, I'm dropping stuff all over the place, all upset. It's a real brouhaha out there in the recruiting world these days. And that in mind, Dale, we're about out of time. Let's be sure, everybody out there, to follow us on Facebook at the Brouhaha and let us know of topics that you would be interested in hearing about. You can, post that on our Facebook page and we'll follow up on it. Also, stay tuned after this show for War Eagle Football with Coach Jack Hankins tonight, coming up right here. Dale and I wish each of you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And now it's time to say goodbye, Dale.
Goodbye, Dale.
We'll see you next week for more of the Brouhaha. Take us out of here, Jamie.
You've been listening to the Brouhaha with Dale McKee and Marshall Wood. Heard Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. on WABO. For more of the Brouhaha, follow us during the week on Facebook and WABO.